Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so I've got a quick slideshow, inshallah, focusing on the coming kind of mock exam to do with English language fiction paper 2. So I think without further ado, let me just get into it. This is actually the second part because I've already done section A to do with the reading paper, and this is more to do with the writing paper, and specifically transactional writing, which is the kind of complementary to the creative writing, which was on paper 1. So let's move on. So writing section B, there's a choice of 2 questions. That's what's going to happen when you turn the paper on the actual, GCSE day, or whether you're doing mocks or whatever you're doing. You have to pick one, okay? So what's the length of the time for the exam? Well, it's 45 minutes. Okay, so in 45 minutes, what you have to do is you have to plan. Now, for the transactional writing, you could take as in terms of minutes, 5 minutes maybe, but I would say 10 minutes max. Obviously, the more time you use in planning, the more structured it will be, which is good. But then it'll also take away time from your actual writing. Now, the writing question is question 8 or 9. So you have to pick one of those. The content is worth 24 marks, and the VSPAG, which is vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, and grammar, is worth 16 marks. That's a total of 40 marks for this question. So what about the actual writing time for the actual transactional writing itself? Well, it's between 30 to 35 minutes. And that leaves you with a spare 5 minutes for checking and editing. And I can't stress enough how much that's actually vital, especially if you're somebody who makes quite a few spelling mistakes or punctuation errors or problems with capitalization, whether it's after full stops or people's names, place names, proper nouns. This is a really vital 5 minutes. Why? Because the VSPAG, remember, 60 marks is a lot. And you see the V for vocabulary, S for spelling, P for punctuation. Very, very important. Okay, moving on. So how do we plan for this exam? Well, in terms of paragraphs, what I would recommend is you have not only 1 paragraph or 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, possibly 6 paragraphs. Okay, it's 5 to 6 paragraphs by and large. Now, I've kind of divided it. You can see these blue lines. What do you need to cover? Well, you need an effective opening. Okay, don't think of your first paragraph as an introduction. You're not writing an essay. Okay, so that's what we can say without a shadow of a doubt. You're writing something like an article or a letter or text for a speech, something along these lines. You need a hook. So the first paragraph is to grab the reader's attention. You have to make it interesting. Okay, so you have to think about your style and how you do that. Now, the middle, which is the middle paragraphs between 2 to 5, I've called it the robust middle, which is your main content. You need to have a central point that you're making, and this is your argument. Okay, so what's your argument? Even if you don't, you're not writing argumentatively, you still need to have a main message. Okay, we can break that down in a moment. The last thing you need is a memorable ending. This is, so again, not a conclusion. You're not writing an essay. So what you want in your memorable ending is something that is an idea that you leave in the mind of the reader. So leave a thought in the mind of the reader. So let's look quickly into the middle. Maybe paragraph 2 is you note down your perspective and you've got one major point. Now, paragraph 3 could be also your perspective, but you have a second, almost separate point. Okay. Now we're going to talk about paragraph 3 in a minute. What is essential is 4 and 5, paragraph 4 and 5, where you lay down the counter arguments. What is that? That is to say, your you have your perspective, but there might be an alternative perspective. So you put that forward in the fourth paragraph. And what you should do in the fifth paragraph before you get to your last memorable ending is to think through your response to those arguments against you. So you're countering the counter arguments. Again, you know, this seems like it's lending itself to write argumentatively, perhaps persuasively. But even if you're writing informatively, or you're doing a description piece, there's always other perspectives that you can elaborate. And my suggestion is try and put that forward because it shows that you are versatile, or you are your awareness of the issue is wide. So you don't only have your perspective, but you are willing to engage with other perspectives. I wouldn't suggest too many perspectives. All right. Okay. Maybe one or two counter arguments. That's it. That's enough. Now, why have I crossed out paragraph 3? When you get to the end of paragraph 2, you have to check your time. If you feel that you're running out of time, this second point, in terms of your perspective, paragraph 3 should be just get rid of it. You don't need it if you're running out of time. What you do need is the counter argument and then the counter to those arguments, right? Just to reiterate, that paragraph 5, okay, is you reinforcing your perspective that you'd already made in paragraph 2, ideally with more or newer information. So it shouldn't be just repeating yourself. It should be new arguments, especially responding to anything that you've just made in the previous paragraph. Okay, so that's kind of the overall plan. Kind of a general snapshot, I would suggest. Try to see how this works, especially in a mock, and then get the teacher's feedback to see if it worked or not. What else have we got? Okay, these are the types of questions. So question 8, I've colored it as a light blue, and question 9, I've colored it as a greeny color. Now, the fact is, between question 8 and 9, there's no real difference between the questions in this section, unlike paper 1. But they do give you 3 bullet points of what you could include. Okay, so they do help you think about what you could write. They give you some ideas. They also say you may include your ideas, your own ideas. And now I would suggest that you I think you should take this on board. You should always have something that they've not included, okay? Because you're trying to not sound like everybody else. And that's you trying to get it into the grade 7s, 8s, and 9s. There has to be something kind of original, even though they've given you bullet points and everyone else is doing it and they're helping you. Don't just rely on those bullet points, okay? Now, you might ask me, is it possible to still get a grade 7, 8, and 9 by just doing whatever they ask you to? And the answer is yes, but you're missing the point. The point here is you're trying to have an original voice, okay? Obviously, this is assuming that your vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, and grammar is strong, okay? If it isn't that, you need to ensure that you're not losing points here, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about that right near the end, okay? But it does remind you about the fact that you are going to be marked on vocabulary, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So as I say, 5 to 6 major paragraphs or 3 to 5 sides, okay? That's what I would recommend in terms if you're thinking about quantity. Now let's have a look at some of the questions. So the sample paper for question 8 was write a letter to the MI6 applying for a position as an intelligence officer. June 2017, write an article for a magazine about your most prized possessions. Okay. November 2017, write a section for a guidebook giving advice to people planning to travel. That's a bit different. June 2018, write an article, another one, for a newspaper. So this is different to a magazine with the title, How Music Affects People. Moving on. November 2018, write the text for a speech you'll give to your peers about an important person in your life. June 2019, write a letter applying for a job at a local guest house or hotel. November 2019, your school or college is writing an information guide for students who are new to the school or college. Write the section for the guide with the title Stress-Free Settling In. Okay, that's kind of similar to the other one about the information guide that was mentioned earlier. June 2020 was COVID, so there was nothing there. November 2020, write a review of an interesting or exciting event you have seen. November 2021, write the text for a speech you will give to your peers, persuading them to volunteer with a charity. June 2022, write an article for a magazine about traveling to different places. Okay, so that's an overview of question 8. Let's move on to question 9, and you'll notice it's not that similar, not that dissimilar rather, to question 8. So sample paper, write an article for a newspaper exploring how technology can track our movements. June 2017, write the text for a speech that you will give to your peers, giving essential advice on being organized. November 2017, your school or college has invited suggestions for an inspirational public figure to give a speech to staff and students. Write a letter to the head teacher or principal giving your suggestion. In June 2018, write a review of a band or concert, film or book that you feel strongly about. November 2018, write an article for a magazine with the title Ups and Downs of Relationships. June 2019, write an article for a newspaper with the title Making the Best of a Bad Situation. November 2019, your local newspaper has published a report with the title Discrimination Still Exists Today, Nothing Can Be Done About It. Write a letter to the newspaper giving your views. And June 2020, there was nothing based on the COVID. November 2020, write an article for a magazine in which you express your views or on competition. November 2021, write an article for a newspaper with the title Celebrate the Good Things in Life. June 2022, your school or college has invited letters from students on the following theme. It is essential to explore the extremes of our planet as long as we are not damaging it ourselves. So write a letter to the head teacher or principal giving your thoughts. So what I've done in my next section is kind of come some kind of conclusion. If we were to sort of sift through them, what can we say? For question 8 and question 9. Question 8, you tend to have 4 types of things. Write an article, so that's your form, for a magazine about and then it talks about a subject. Or it might say an article, again, a form for a newspaper with and a title. So either it's an article for a magazine or an article, and it either tells you what to talk about in terms of subject, or it actually gives you a title. The second type is it will say write a letter, which is the form, to an audience applying for, and it gives you a purpose. Okay. So notice in question 8 so far, I think there were 2 examples, is a letter to apply for something. Okay. Now the guidebook, it says write a guidebook. That's again the form for, and it gives you a purpose to an audience, or it has a title. So it's either or so far as we've seen. The last one is write a speech or a review, which is the form with a purpose, and it's about a subject. Okay. How does that differ to question 9? You'll see it doesn't differ that much. 3 types we've seen in question 9. Write an article, again, a form for a newspaper or magazine with a title about a subject. So usually it gives you, asks you to write an article for either a newspaper or magazine, and it focuses specifically on a title. That seems to be consistent in question 9. And occasionally it tells you even the subject. What about letter? It says write a letter for an audience with a purpose. Yeah, so in this case, it's not necessarily about applying. Okay, the letter in question 9 is not about applying for something. And finally, write a speech or review, which is a form about a subject or a purpose. Okay, so do you see how there's lots of similarities, not that much, not too dissimilar. Okay, so what's our strategies going forward? Basic but necessary strategies. First of all, you need to have your 3 moments. Now, we've already mentioned this. We'll touch on it again in a minute. You need an issue or some complication that you're dealing with. Okay, it's your central theme, what I called your main argument. Okay, and also you need to have some kind of development of your point. So, for example, when you do the counter to the counter arguments, is a type of development, isn't it? Because you are extending something you've already set out Do not just keep repeating yourself. That's not developing. That's just repetition. Don't do that. Okay. The three moments is your effective opening, your robust middle, your memorable ending. Okay. Try to remember those three things. The issue could be a challenge or a problem, something to overcome. Okay. That is something you're dealing with. Okay. Something topical, whatever the question is asking you, you have to really think through a central major point, which it might have side points. Okay. The side points, bring them out in the, do you remember when I mentioned this, your second point, your second perspective in that paragraph? That's where you can put all the subsidiary ideas. Okay. What about development of your point? Well, consider contrasting perspectives. Okay. If you're dealing with counter arguments, that will inevitably come out. Finally, add details. So don't just talk about this, that, and the other, and you don't give specific examples. You need to kind of come in and give at least, I would suggest, 2 detailed examples. And if you can't do 2, then 1 detailed example. So you go in. So often you're trying to cover a lot of range, okay? You're trying to be wide in terms of need to cover so many different things, but sometimes you need to pick one and go into a bit of detail. So this is more about depth, okay? So you need to do breadth and depth. Also, you've got to have language devices. So when you're writing, try to use your similes, try to use a metaphor, try to have irony at least once, try to use some contrast type of language devices. For example, one oxymoron, maybe antithesis, something like this. Obviously, you've got to think about your emotive vocabulary here and there, whether it's adjectives or strong verbs. So many different things you can do, okay? But the important one is get your punctuation correct. And the last but not least, your extensive vocabulary. You need to use long words, something you don't often use. You need to have long words. I would say at least 1 per paragraph, and that's a bare minimum, is a must. Okay. Features. Just the last few points really to make here. If you are writing to inform or explain or review, then don't forget things you should have in your main body: facts, statistics, quotes, expert opinion, an anecdote, general opinions or a poll, background or historical facts. Okay, it's because you're writing to inform, so you need to be very data heavy. Okay, if you're writing to influence, advise, persuade, and argue, notwithstanding the points I've already made above, yeah, you can also directly address the audience, by using the second person you. Use lists, antithesis, which is contrast, hyperbole, which is to say exaggeration, rhetorical questions, imagery, sound patterns, meaning using alliteration, sibilants, etc., and irony, like I said. So this is more, you're kind of trying to influence and get to the heart of someone. You're trying to influence people's hearts and minds. So sometimes a little bit more emotive in your a presentation. Okay. Don't forget about the idea of your perspective. Okay. Don't forget your tone, the tone of your writing. Okay. Be engaging. Okay. Have a perspective. Register is all about informality or formality. So you've got to think a little bit about that. And also your style. So a little bit of detail. So in terms of perspective, what's your angle? How are you framing the discussion? Tone, how does it sound? How does your writing sound? Somebody was to read it. Okay. Register, how informal or formal are you going to be? When you do an article, you are able to become slightly informal, but just be careful you don't break into sort of slang phrases. Okay, because that'll be too informal. All right. Style, think of your vocabulary and make sure your writing has character. Okay. Now the best thing to do is look at model answers. That's what I'd suggest. Look at model answers. They're actually really critical. Okay, Jazakallah khairan. I think that's the end of the presentation. I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for you. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.